Irreconcilable differences. The Palestinian Prime Minister quits after a simmering feud with the president. He leaves an economy in crisis and the government in disarray, just as the United States was making a new push for peace in the Middle East. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rida Fakhri. He is a former World Bank economist, respected by the West and credited with laying some of the groundwork for a future Palestinian state. But Prime Minister Salam Fayyad was facing problems too over the handling of the economy, his strong stance against corruption, the extent of his authority and a strained relationship with President Mahmoud Abbas. The Palestinian Authority has been in crisis for many months. Public servants haven't been paid and there have even been protests over price rises and tax hikes. The tipping point for Fayyad, though, seemed to have come when the finance minister stepped down. Fayyad accepted his resignation, but Abbas overruled him. Politically independent, Fayyad was also vulnerable to pressure from the main Palestinian factions, Abbas's Fatah party and Hamas, which governs Gaza. And some saw in him an obstacle to reconciliation between the two groups. This was the reaction from Fatah and Hamas.
Fatah accepts this resignation. Fatah has been calling for the resignation of Salam Fayyad for a long time because we've many reservations about his financial and economic policies.
Accepting the resignation of Salam Fayyad has no relation at all with the Palestinian Reconciliation Agreement. It is related to the differences between Salam Fayyad and the Fatah movement, and the Fatah movement demands to outcast him, which was obvious at the last Fatah Revolution Committee meeting. The ball now is in Fatah's court. If they are serious about implementing the reconciliation agreement, they have to implement the agreement completely and not to select parts of it. Fayyad is leaving the government after drowning Palestinians with a huge debt, and the Fatah movement is responsible for this.
Much to discuss. Let's bring in our guest in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, Resigned Khatib, a former government spokesman under Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad. In Beirut, Osama Hamdan, head of international relations for Hamas. And joining us from our Washington studios, Richard Weitz, senior fellow and director of the Center for Political Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. Resigned Khatib, you've worked closely with Salam Fayyad. What was the main underlying grievance that led to his resignation?
I think that the resignation of Salam Fayyad has been dragging for a really long while. He submitted his resignation several times that were not accepted by the president, and he also communicated his intention of resigning 2-3 weeks ago in written to the president. And now, after a lot of pressure from his side, the president accepted his resignation.
Why now, though? Why did the president suddenly accept this resignation?
There has been several reasons for this. I think it's the insistence of the Prime Minister which led the President to accept, because in all previous instances, the President was able to convince the Prime Minister to give it another chance. But now it seems that the Prime Minister is insisting to an extent that the President could not convince him to continue.
But beyond it being an issue of Salam Fayyad insisting, it seems that he lacked the support and backing of Mahmoud Abbas. In fact, he'd been criticized in recent days and recent months by Fatah for his economic policies, some within Fatah calling them confused. And we noticed that Mahmoud Abbas never intervened to try to publicly defend him. Was it also an issue of a power struggle between the two men?
I don't know exactly the particular attitude or position of the president personally, but you're right in saying that Fatah has been recently critical of Salam Fayyad. And I think that Fatah has been trying to divert the public criticisms to the recent difficulties in the economic performance of the Palestinian Authority against Prime Minister Fayyad. The irony here is that these economic difficulties are not the responsibility of the government, because there are very well-known reasons for it, and it has to do with the Israeli attitude of refraining to transfer the taxes and the clear decline of the foreign aid to the Palestinian Authority that has been causing these economic difficulties. But for internal political competitions, I think certain elements in Fatah worked on diverting the public anger and the criticism to the Prime Minister in particular, and this led into increase in strikes of trade unions of different kinds directed against the government and the Prime Minister, in addition to increase in the negative attitude within Fatah movement in particular to the Prime Minister, which led into situations whereby the Prime Minister felt himself crippled and unable really to pursue his responsibilities.
And it isn't just Fatah members accusing Salam Fayyad of pursuing the wrong economic policies. Osama Hamdan, Hamas as well, has been extremely critical of Fayyad's economic policies. Is it fair criticism, though? Are you essentially trying to blame him, as many within the Palestinian Authority have done, for all the economic problems facing the Palestinians?
Well, it's not the idea of just blaming Salam Fayyad. Salam Fayyad has no legitimacy, as everyone knows. He was not endorsed by the Legislative Council, and his economical policies created great problems for the Palestinians. In fact, he tended to be more dependent on the foreigner aid, and his power was from that point. He bring the money. That was his power. When we formed the unity government, the main argument to bring Salam Fayyad as a finance minister was he is the only one who can bring the money from outside, from the United States and Europe. And here why the United States and Europe were pushing hard to keep him as a prime minister. Although he is not accepted by the Palestinians, both Hamas, Fatah, and most of the Palestinian organizations. I think the idea is not what he has done in the economics. The idea, he acted in a way which created more problems than solving the problems for the Palestinians.
Do you concede, though, that he did tackle the issue of corruption, which was so endemic within the Palestinian leadership, certainly within the Fatah ranks before he came on board? And do you also disagree with those who say he did do a lot to bring the trust, the support of Western donors?
In fact, all what he has done regarding to the corruption was a kind of propaganda. We saw new corrupted people, a new businessman who was related to Salam Fayyad came in the market and took the advantage of that. He did not work against the corruption. He created a new layer of corrupted people, and he was protected by the donors just because they wanted to create a kind of good economics in West Bank to tell the Palestinian people in a way, if you supported Hamas, you will live in a poverty under the siege in Gaza, and if you supported the peace process, Salam Fayyad, you will have a good life, and we will finance this good life. So there was a creation for another layer of corrupted people, not a kind of eliminated the corrupted elements in the Palestinian economics.
A new layer of corruption, you say, but this certainly doesn't match the view many in Washington and other Western capitals have of Salam Fayyad's record. Richard Weiss, the US has described him as, quote, a strong partner and a leader in promoting economic growth. But as you see, there's a huge discrepancy between how the US and other Western powers sees him and how many Palestinians view his record.
Well,
yes, and that is evident even from the comments we just heard. That's basically the way it was described is correct. He was considered to be very good financial manager and very good at combating corruption. Somebody the West felt comfortable giving loans to, sending money through, funneling their aid through. But he didn't have a base of support within the Palestinian political structure. He wasn't a member of either the party. He didn't have his own party. And so this is he was very good to run a technocratic administration, but that he has really no independent political base to rely on when he comes into conflict with one of the or both of those groups.
And by supporting him so publicly and essentially propping him up in such a way, did the U.S. unwittingly then weaken that popular base that he lacked to begin with?
I don't know. I don't think that was a major factor. I mean, the U.S. Support for him was evident, even if it had been very quiet. I think that was his strength, was the fact that he could have good relations with the Western donors. But those people who were hostile to the United States were going to be hostile to him anyway. So I don't think it really mattered.
Well, this isn't the first time Salam Fayyad has offered to stand down. It's understood many in the West had been eager for him to stay on. Fayyad was educated in the United States and worked for the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. He served twice as Palestinian finance minister before being appointed prime minister in 2007 following the takeover of Gaza by Hamas. He is admired in the West and even in Israel, with Haaretz newspaper once describing him as everyone's favorite Palestinian. So, big shoes to fill in many respects, Ghassan Khatib. Who would be best positioned then to fill those shoes as Prime Minister?
I don't know, but I need to comment on a previous note, please. I think there is a myth that the strength of Salam Fayyad is mainly coming from his contacts with the West, and that he is very much credible in the eyes of the outside world. I think that this is only half of the truth. I think the other half is that Salam Fayyad managed to create a great deal of popularity and credibility among many Palestinians. And I think that public opinion polls have shown that he managed to create a satisfactory level of public support for his activities in the territories. And I think it's particularly the increase in his public stand and public strength locally, which created a feeling of threat of him by many of the Fatah leaders. And this is one of the reasons why they increased the criticisms against him and made several efforts to get him out of the way. So it's not at all correct that the guy is credible and powerful outside but lacks a popular base locally. I think he is as strong outside as he is inside. And again, this is one of the reasons that created the feeling of unease towards him by some of the Fatah leaders. I think that things are not clear because the president, I guess, has three different scenarios, possible scenarios. Either he will move ahead with the reconciliation with Hamas and implement the agreement which stipulates that the next government should be a national unity government headed directly by the president. And this is, in my view, the safest probably for President Abbas. The other scenario is to appoint one of the Fatah leaders. And the third scenario is to select an independent personalities from outside Fatah movement. And I think that things are not clear yet, even probably in the higher circles around the president as of now.
Osama Hamdan, who would Hamas like to see as a replacement for Salam Fayyad? Hamas has welcomed his resignation, accusing him of, quote, protecting the Zionist occupation and U.S. interests. How do you, first of all, substantiate these accusations? And do you see him as an impediment to reconciliation? Are you happy that he's left? Who would you like to see as a replacement?
Well, everyone knows that Salam Fayyad was appointed as a prime minister after the division between Hamas and Fatah in 2007, and through those years he supported the security for Israel, and he financed mostly the security apparatus which was created after the division. And also he did not did well in the economics. In fact, 70% of the productive economic, Palestinian economic, was shut down during the period from 2007 to 2012. I want to say he was an obstacle and he has no popularity. His own popularity was the support of the United States, which they have done their best to keep him in the position, mainly the last day of being the prime minister when they urged Abu Mazen to keep him in the position. For the future, we believe we have an agreement, Cairo agreement for the Palestinian reconciliation, which we have talked that the prime minister is supposed to be an independent person. Then we have signed Doha agreement, which we both agreed to have Abu Mazen, the president, as a prime minister for the transition period. So we hope that we can see Abu Mazen starting his contacts to form the government, leading the government, to have the new elections within the period which we have agreed on in around the upcoming 6 months. If that happened, I believe it will be the best scenario to have. Any other scenarios will keep the Palestinian division as it is, and the one who will be responsible for that, Abu Mazen himself, because now Salam Fayyad have left the position, no excuses. He has to start the formation of the government.
A tall order, lots that any future Prime Minister needs to tackle. Richard Whites, how much of a blow, though, is his resignation for the prestige, the influence of the United States and its administration in the region? Because we know that both President Barack Obama and his Secretary of State, John Kerry, actually did quite a bit in terms of efforts that they tried to put into this to make sure that he doesn't resign, and yet they were not able to keep him in place.
Yes, I think that it's not clear to me this is any additional blow than the failure of their efforts to keep the Palestinians from seeking the declaration of statehood in the General Assembly of the UN, or their inability to get the Netanyahu government to stop the settlements. I think it's just one more sign about how weak U.S. influence is in the Israel-Palestine, Israel-Arab front. And I think it's just going to continue to drive the administration as much as it can to turn to Asia and other areas where they think they have more influence. I mean, this administration tried very hard the first few years to make some progress on the Israel-Palestine front and was unable to really do that. And since then, they've been sort of lost interest in the area, and I think this is just going to push them along in that same direction.
And can the U.S. continue to argue that it is doing all it can to try to improve the economic prospects of the Palestinian people when it remains opposed to any notion of a reconciliation between the two main factions, Fatah and Hamas, when it essentially wants nothing to do with the Hamas-run Gaza Strip?
Giving aid would be tough because of there's just a lot of opposition to that directly. But they're trying to, obviously, the more the Palestinians suffer, the more likely we're going to see a spread of what the disorders we're seeing now, and in Syria, and we saw earlier in Egypt and Tunisia. And Palestine and Jordan are ripe for that kind of a situation, which I think everyone would like to avoid. And so there's a cross pressure. I think they'll continue at least to try and help the Palestinian Authority and not take any effort to try and impede Hamas's economic activities, as long as they're not related to smuggling of weapons or something.
Let's take perhaps a quick look at the economic situation of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Authority's economy is at the heart of much of this. It's been in decline for many reasons. The U.S. government has cut the amount of aid it gives the Palestinian Authority. Israel often delays transferring tax payments, and Arab allies have failed to deliver on some of their promised assistance. Outgoing Finance Minister Nabil Kassis forecast the Palestinian Authority's budget deficit for this year would reach $1.4 billion. In 2005, it stood at around $800 million. Latest figures from the World Bank showed economic growth slowed to a little over 6% last year, down from 11% in 2010 and 2011. And gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services, is expected to slow even more this year to 4.7% in the West Bank and 6% in Gaza. Ghassan Khatib, when you look at what Salam Fayyad had been trying to achieve economically, where do you think he went wrong?
I don't think he was wrong in any basic thing regarding the economy. And I want to remind all of us that when the foreign aid was flowing in a satisfactory way and according to the requirements and needs agreed on by the donors' conferences and the World Bank recommendations, the Palestinian economy under the leadership of Prime Minister Salam Fayyad did very well. And I think that one of the reasons behind the current feeling of worries among the Palestinian public after the resignation of Fayyad is that his name was associated with two major transformations. The first one, transferring the Palestinian financial administration from irregularities and corruption and lots of problems into one that managed to create credibility and confidence by donors and Palestinians. And second, moving the Palestinian society from the lawlessness and the chaotic security situations into rule of law and some kind of security stability, which complemented the economic efforts and allowed for some serious improvement in the economic situations and the security situations. The reason for the recent deterioration is, as you stipulated and as the World Bank and IMF reports stipulated, it is related, one, to the Israeli restrictions, including on the transformation of the Palestinian taxes to the Palestinian Authority, and the dramatic decline in the contribution of the international donors community and the foreign aid. Otherwise, the financial administration and the economic administration and the creation of sufficient public institutions was satisfactory to the Palestinian people and satisfactory to the relevant international agencies, including the World Bank and the IMF.
So that was on the economic front, but I want to put to you a point that was made earlier by Osama Hamdan, in which he said that Salam Fayyad essentially had no legitimacy. What are the political implications of his resignation for Mahmoud Abbas? Does it now call into question his own mandate as president, which expired many years ago, in fact, in January of 2009, and there haven't been any elections since? He unilaterally extended that mandate for a year, and, well, 3-4 years on, he is still president. Does it call into question his own mandate now that he will have to appoint a new prime minister?
I think that this resignation is the third major crisis that is adding to the difficulties facing the Palestinian Authority. The first was the split between Fatah and Hamas, and the second was the inability of conducting election and the legitimacy problems facing the Palestinian Authority, and the third is the resignation of Dr. Salam Fayyad. I think that this is a problem in an additional sense. You know, Salam Fayyad is the only non-Fatah strong personality within the Palestinian Authority, and his presence added a lot to the sense of checks and balances in the Palestinian Authority, which is basically composed of Fatah leaders. The absence of a non-Fatah strong personality in an important position would affect negatively the level of checks and balances in the Palestinian system.
Osama Hamdan, will you question the basis on which Mahmoud Abbas appoints his next prime minister, or will you accept it?
Well, I think it's not an idea only of his legitimacy. We know that there is a problem, an internal Palestinian problem, and there is a Palestinian reconciliation process. According to this process, Abu Mazen was supposed to be the next prime minister also. So if he went this direction, if he started forming the government, that means Fatah and Abu Mazen are acting in a positive way towards the reconciliation. This will help, and this will solve another problem in the reconciliation, so we can achieve a complete reconciliation going forward to the Palestinian elections. If he has another name, if he appointed someone else to be the prime minister, that will bring us back to the same problem. There is still a split and a division between the Palestinians, and this prime minister has to go to the Legislative Council to have the mandate. He will not go there, so he will be a legitimate prime minister, and we will continue going in this direction. I think Fatah is supposed to make a pressure on Abu Mazen to start his contacts to form the government by himself. We have names from both sides, accepted from both sides, not from Hamas, not from Fatah, but those names are accepted as an independent names, and those people can be the next government and can work as a government head by Abu Mazen. I hope that Abu Mazen can make that decision, and I hope also to hear a positive reaction from the United States, instead of criticizing Hamas or Abu Mazen for the resignation of Salam Fayyad, to say that they accept and they respect the Palestinian will to have a reconciliation and a new government head by Abu Mazen, and this will be the start of ending this division, which was for the last 7 years.
We will leave our discussion there. Thanks to all our guests, Osama Hamdan, Hassan Khatib and Richard White. And as always, thank you for joining us. Don't forget, you can find this program and much more at aljazeera.com. Follow the links for programs and Inside Story. For me, Rida Fakhri, and the entire team, thanks very much for watching.